Hi, parents, and welcome to another episode of The Parent Guide, helping your teen overcome pornography addiction. I'm Matt Bulkley, a psychotherapist who, for the past 25 years, have worked with families navigating through this tough terrain, and I'm here to walk alongside you. Today, we're jumping into understanding a critical concept, and that is understanding the cycle of pornography addiction. Picture it like a whirlpool pulling your teen under with a force that feels impossible to escape. But here's the good news. Understanding this cycle is like throwing your teen a lifeline to be pulled out. And here's the thing, they can only get out with help. It's nearly impossible to escape the grasp of a whirlpool on your own, no matter how hard you swim. And that same concept applies to pornography addiction. Only with outside help can a teen escape. In this episode, we're going to unpack the 5 stages of this addiction cycle, hear a real teen story that brings it to life, and arm you as parents with practical tools to help your teen break free. So whether you're driving, folding laundry, out on a run, or at home relaxing, stick with me for the next half hour. This is about equipping you to guide your teen toward a healthier path. So let's jump in. Parents, the word addiction can feel like a punch to the gut. It's heavy, it's raw. For a lot of parents, it's scary to even think about applying it to your teen. And for teens themselves, being labeled an addict can feel like a scarlet letter. It's shameful, feels isolating. But let's get real for a second here. Addiction isn't just about drugs or alcohol, which historically has been most associated with the concept of addiction. Here's how you need to look at it. Addiction, it's any habit that takes over your life, hijacking your body and mind, making it feel impossible to break free. And pornography addiction fits that bill. So pornography addiction, it's a behavioral condition characterized by compulsive and excessive consumption of pornographic material, despite the negative consequences. It's often marked by an inability to control or reduce use, preoccupation with pornography, and continued engagement with it, even when it disrupts relationships, school, or mental health. Now, clinically, it's debated whether it's a distinct disorder or a subset of compulsive sexual behavior, and technically, it's not a primary diagnosis. It's not found in the DSM diagnostic code manual. But here's the thing, key features include compulsive use, spending significant time seeking or consuming pornography, often at the expense of other responsibilities, a loss of control, meaning repeated failed attempts to cut back or to stop its use, tolerance, meaning that there's more, needing more explicit or frequent content to achieve the same level of satisfaction. Negative impact, meaning harm to relationships, self-esteem, or productivity, often accompanied by shame or guilt. And then withdrawal symptoms, often anxiety, irritability, restlessness when unable to access pornography. And in the field of psychology, there's been some debate over the term or the concept of pornography addiction versus some people prefer to say problematic pornography use, PPU, which the debate centers mainly on terminology and just conceptual accuracy, describing excessive or harmful pornography consumption. So brief summary, that whole debate is that proponents for calling it pornography addiction argue that term addiction accurately captures the compulsive, uncontrollable nature of excessive pornography use, similar to substance addictions or behavioral addictions. And they point to symptoms like loss of control, withdrawal, negative life impacts, supported by some neuroimaging studies suggesting literal brain changes akin to substance addiction. And critics argue that addiction is misleading because pornography lacks the chemical dependency of substances and evidence for it meeting strict addiction criteria such as tolerance and withdrawal, as they debate whether there is a true tolerance or dependence that occurs. They also argue that the term addiction may pathologize normal behavior, exaggerate the harm, or that it carries moralistic connotations. So some prefer to refer to it as, again, as I'd stated, problematic pornography use, PPU. And that term, it's broader, less stigmatizing, still describing dysfunctional use, but without implying a clinical addiction. So it focuses on negative consequences such as relationship strain or paired functioning and aligns with harm-based frameworks, avoiding overdiagnosis. But the critics of PPU argue that it tends to downplay the severity for those who exhibit those compulsive behaviors, minimizing the need for intensive treatment, and that it may lack the specificity to guide research or clinical practice compared to when using the term addiction. Here's the thing. In summary, the debate hinges on balancing scientific precision with practical utility. And I think both sides can agree that there's a need for more research and a clinical observation of it for clarification. But regardless of how it's classified or whether we call it pornography addiction or problematic pornography use, PPU, the reality is that it's real, it's sneaky, and it grabs hold tight. So back to this whirlpool analogy. Think of it like a whirlpool in the ocean. Once you're caught in that spin, it's relentless, pulling everything down with it. Smart sailors avoid whirlpools because they've seen the wreckage. And today, we're going to map out that whirlpool, that cycle of addiction, so you and your teen can steer clear of it. And if your teen is caught in it, to help them get out of it. So before we break it down, let me just tell you about a teen. We'll call him Michael. As always, names are changed to protect confidentiality. But his story is a window into how this cycle takes hold, and it's more common than you think. So when Michael was 11, he first had exposure to pornography. A friend from school showed him explicit images on a phone during a sleepover, and he knew it was wrong. His parents had taught him, learned it in church, and they'd been clear about that, but curiosity got the better of him, and that was his first mistake. He leaned into it instead of shutting it down. And at first, it was just occasional peeks here and there, maybe once a month. And he'd feel guilty afterwards and tell himself he wouldn't do it again. And sometimes that would last for weeks or even months before another peak. But here's the kicker. He kept it all a secret. And that was mistake number 2. So by age 14, Michael was a pro at covering his tracks, clearing his browser history, using incognito mode, even had a secret hidden phone that his parents didn't know about, devoted exclusively for seeking out porn. And you name it, every moment with the screen became a potential porn hunt. And that was mistake number 3. He let it take over. The promises to quit, they started crumbling faster. Weeks of staying clean turned into days and then hours. By the time he was 16, he realized it wasn't just a bad habit. It had claws in him deep. And Michael's story isn't unique. I've seen it played out with so many teens over the years in my practice. It's a classic slide into addiction. He didn't nip it in the bud early. He hid it from everyone, and he let it grow unchecked. And if it just opened up to a parent or a friend or a mentor, church leader, he might have avoided that spiral. Well, so what is driving this? Why does it happen? Let's break that down. Let's break the addiction cycle down to understand the mechanics of this whirlpool. But before we dive into that cycle, I do want to take a moment. If you're a parent listening, think about your teen. Have you noticed them withdrawing, spending more time on screens, or seeming weighed down by something that they won't talk about? Something's weighing on their shoulders. And I want you to hold that thought as we unpack this. And it's going to help give you some clarity here. Let's get into the nuts and bolts. The addiction cycle. It's a 5-stage loop that tightens with every turn. It's like a trap that your teen can't just wish away. But knowing these stages is like shining a flashlight into a dark room. And it really is that phenomena of knowledge is power. Shows you what you're dealing with. And in the Breaking Free workbook, there's a great graphic of this 5-stage cycle. And there's actually a YouTube video that gives a visual of those stages as well. So if you haven't seen the graphic of the cycle, make sure to take a look. Here's how it works. Stage 1, called emotional triggers, and this is where it all starts. This is the root of the problem. Something's eating at your teen, and they're looking for a way to cope. It could be inadequacy from comparing themselves to people on social media, Instagram influencers. Could be boredom from long unstructured hours after school, or stress from school. Could be family conflicts or a breakup with a girlfriend. Porn feels like a quick fix. It numbs the pain. I take Jake, a 16-year-old that I recently had a session with. He bombed a math test, felt like a total failure, and porn became his escape from that sting. And it's not about the content at first. It's about dulling the hurt. And teens do it because it works. It provides an actual, albeit short-term temporary escape from that pain. So that takes us to stage 2, cravings. Once that trigger hits, the brain kicks into gear. It's like a split screen TV. Sexual thoughts start flickering in. And if your teen lingers on those thoughts, they snowball into vivid fantasies, cranking up arousal. And porn feeds that fire. And soon, the big stuff in life, school, friends, sports, family, starts fading behind this haze of cravings. Another client, I call him Mike, 17, who'd be well-intended to avoid porn, but would see suggestive memes while online scrolling social media. And with just a few minutes, his brain started to start spinning a fantasy, itching for a hit. And that's the craving stage that's locking in. So stage 3, the acting out stage, this is where willpower takes a hit. The cravings get so intense that your teen gives in. And as we know from the neuroscience, the capacity for impulse control becomes impaired. Binging on porn, maybe risking the family computer, having a hidden phone for porn use, or sneaking it on their phone, becomes reckless. It's like one of my clients, Tyler, who's 15. His stay up late at night, listen closely for parents to close the door and go to bed, and then sneak a tablet into his bedroom, into bed, zoning out and chasing that high. And it's at this stage, they're not thinking about the consequences, just thinking about the next click, trying to find that right video, which then takes it to stage 4, which is the temporary relief. For just a brief moment, the chaos stops, the stress, the boredom, feelings of inadequacy, it all fades. Another example, Zane, age 14, felt invisible after consistently being ditched by what he thought were his friends at school. Discovered that porn blanked out that hurt for just a short period of time, 10 or 15 minutes. But here's the thing, when he closed the tab after acting out with the porn, that pain came roaring back, often sharper than before. And that relief, it's a lie. It's fleeting, it's short-lived, and only a form of self-deceit, and sets up the next stage, that final stage, stage 5, called regret and shame. After the high crashes and the guilt floods in, your teen feels disappointed and disgusted with themselves. Like another client, Kai, age 16, who drowned in shame, swearing to never do it again. And that resolve is powerful for a time. It's a spark of hope, but it's fragile. Sometimes lasts a few days or a week or maybe even a few weeks. But without a plan, those cravings creep back and the cycle restarts, tighter and faster each time. So sit with that for a second. If you're picturing your teen in this cycle, it might feel heavy, but here's the thing, knowing these stages, the triggers, cravings, acting out, relief, and then regret, it means that you're not in the dark anymore. It means that you understand it. You've got a map, and again, knowledge is power. Understanding these predictable stages in the cycle can be an intervention in disrupting the addiction. And in a bit, we'll talk about how to use that. But first, let's dig into why the cycle is so tough to break. And here's the hard truth. The cycle isn't just about willpower. So back to the analogy of the whirlpool. No matter how hard you swim or how good of a swimmer you are, you can't get out of the whirlpool without outside help. Someone has to throw you a lifeline. And as we know, pornography addiction rewires the brain. A 2022 study in the archives of sexual behavior found that dopamine spikes from porn mimic patterns of drug addiction, hijacking the brain's reward system. And just as a refresher, dopamine is that feel-good chemical, and porn floods the brain with it, creating new pathways that scream, "Do this again." It's like your teen's brain is a gaming console reprogramming itself to chase that high. Another study, a 2020 report in the Journal of Behavioral Addictions, backs this up as well, showing that emotional triggers like stress, loneliness, feelings of inadequacy raise the risk of relapse by 40% if they're not addressed. And each stage of the cycle fuels the next. Pain sparks cravings, cravings drive binges, relief fades to shame, and the shame loops back to the pain. And it's not your teen being weak, it's neuroplasticity at work. Their brain is learning to crave porn, making quitting feel like fighting a boss level video game with a broken controller. Yet another study, a 2019 study in the Journal of Adolescent Health, showed that teens' brains are more sensitive to porn than adults because of something called neuroplasticity, which is the brain's ability to rewire itself based on experiences. So it's why teens learn so fast, but it also means that they're prime targets for addiction. And lastly, a 2023 neuroscience news study found that heavy porn use can actually shrink the gray matter in the prefrontal cortex, which weakens impulse control. So when your teen struggles to say no to porn, it's usually not about a lack of morals. It's about their brain being sculpted by what they watch. But here's the flip side. The brain can be rewired for good too. 2023 study in addictive behaviors found that teens who understand how dopamine drives the addiction cycle cut their cravings faster because they're not fighting blind. Again, knowledge is power. And that's what we're building here today. It's understanding this cycle. So before we move on, I want you to think about this. What's one trigger that you've noticed in your teen's life? Emotional trigger. Maybe it's stress from school. Maybe they're pulling away socially from a peer group. I want you to jot it down mentally, and we're going to come back to that when we talk about breaking the cycle. So, all right, parents, here's where hope comes in. This addiction cycle is a beast, but it's not unbeatable. And again, knowing the cycle is like having the cheat code. It's a roadmap. So it's not a life sentence. A study in 2019 from Counseling Psychology Quarterly found that teens who learn to spot their emotional triggers, like stress or anxiety or boredom, boost their recovery odds by 35%. So Michael, the teen who we talked about in the beginning of the podcast episode, learned this the hard way. But when he finally got it, he started swapping late night scrolls for healthier outlets like talking about his emotions, hitting the gym, and actually talking with his voice and calling friends. And that slowed the spiral. So, how do you help your teen break this loop? I'm going to give you 3 practical steps backed by research and real world results. So, here we go. Now, step 1, name the emotional triggers. So, encourage your teen to ask, "What's pulling me in?" 2022 article from Neuroscience News says naming a trigger shrinks its power over you. So if stress from a bad grade is the spark, suggests they go for a run or journal instead of turning to a screen. For example, I worked with a teen recently, I'll call him Sean, who in therapy session realized that his late night binges started when he was feeling overwhelmed by homework and needed a break. So once he named that trigger, he started setting a timer to take breaks and to call a friend instead. And it wasn't perfect, but it did start that disruption of the cycle. So step 2, redirect the cravings. So when those sexual thoughts or fantasies hit, your teen needs a plan to pivot. A study in 2020 in Brain and Behavior found that teens who understand the cycle and have a go-to distraction, like a hobby, exercise, even just a quick chat with a friend, stick with recovery 30% longer. So for Michael, the 17-year-old that I'd mentioned, he directed picking up his guitar and strumming when the cravings kicked in. And then here's the thing, it gave his brain something else to focus on long enough that it short circuited the urges to act out and seek out pornography. Then finally, step 3, own the shame. Shame thrives in silence. It's like a weed that grows in the dark. So encourage your teen to share their struggle with somebody that they trust, whether it be you as a parent, a therapist, a mentor, or in a recovery group setting. Study in Psychology Today in 2021 emphasized that mapping the cycle and then talking about it flips the power dynamic. So Michael he finally opened up to his dad, and it was a game changer. So he didn't just quit, he started seeing his triggers clearly and built healthier habits like working out, finding distractions from urges, journaling, talking to friends when stress hits. So let me share another quick story to just bring this home. Worked with a 15-year-old named Ian who was caught in the cycle. He was feeling lonely after moving to a new school and started to binge on pornography to cope, and then would drown in his own shame. And so his parents helped him to break that loop by setting up small but intentional changes. So one idea that I think is a great idea, they created a no screens after 9 p.m. rule, a tech curfew. It's probably a good way to call it, to cut down on late night temptations. They started to help Ian name the triggers, the emotional triggers, which clearly in his case was loneliness, not feeling connected yet in a new school. And this was a big one. So in time, he eventually joined the cross country and track teams at school, which structured his after school time and into the early evenings. And then later in the evenings, when cravings would hit, he'd sketch and draw instead of scroll on a phone. And when the shame crept in, he talked to his mom or to me in therapy, which took away the sting of the shame. And so over time, he was able to rewrite the script. It wasn't instant, but it was progress. So parents, I want you to pause for a second. Think about one small step that you could take to help your teen. Maybe it's having a conversation about what stresses them out, or setting up a screen-free evening routine, creating a tech curfew as we just referenced, or setting up a tech-free bedroom. Small steps add up. And if you're feeling stuck, don't worry. We're going to wrap up with some resources to keep you moving forward. But before we close, let's talk about a few more ways to support your teen. So first, model healthy habits yourself. Parents, if you're glued to your phone or you're binge watching shows on Netflix, your teen notices. Show them what it looks like to manage stress, manage your life effectively without screens or technology. Maybe it's a family walk or a hike or a game night. There's a study in Frontiers in Psychology in 2023. It found teens with parents who model healthy coping skills are 25% more likely to adopt those coping skills themselves. So don't be a hypocrite. Live the technology rules that you impose on your kids. Second, create a safe space for honesty. If your teen fears judgment, they're going to hide their struggles. Let them know that you're on their team and that you're not there to judge. And I've seen teens, like I had one client I'll call Kai, open up when parents say, "Look, I'm here to help, not to shame you." And that trust is everything. So you have to create a safe space for honesty. And then finally, don't go it alone. Connect with professionals. At Therapy Associates here in St. George, Utah, we have several clinicians who specialize in treating teen porn addiction. Get connected with a therapist for support. We also have our weekly teen recovery group, either in person if you're here in Southern Utah, or via Zoom if you're not local. And make sure to use the recovery toolbox for teens. Make sure that you connect both you and your teen with the Breaking Free workbook and the Breaking Free parent guide and the 101 tips for quitting porn workbooks. You can get these on the website, therapyassociates.net, in the bookstore. And the recovery toolbox for teens is the blue version. The brown recovery toolbox is the adult version. So make sure to get the blue version. And for situations where the pornography addiction has veered into safety or risk issues, including sexual acting out or reckless and dangerous online behaviors like sexting, or there's risk of exploitation or hookups with strangers, or if there's pervasive mental health issues where We're worried about self-harm or suicidality or chronic depression, anxiety issues, or for teens that are resistant to help, where they've had experienced previous treatment failures or there's ongoing relapses, or if your teen has just simply gotten to that point that they're discounting your influence in their life and you no longer have any capacity to intervene on your own, then and consider Star Guides. Star Guides is the ultimate intervention for disrupting pornography addiction in teens. So take a look at it, starguides.net, or and listen to a previous podcast episode that we did on Star Guides. And I'll drop these links in the show notes along with the link for the recovery toolbox for teens. Parents, remember, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. Recovery takes time. Setbacks tend to be a part of the process, but every step that your teen takes, naming triggers, redirecting cravings, sharing their shame, it's a victory. Celebrate the small wins, no matter how small that they are. Well, parents, let's wrap this up. The addiction cycle, emotional triggers, cravings, acting out, relief, regret. It's a beast, but it's not unbeatable. And now you've got a map. Help your teens spot their emotional triggers, redirect the cravings, break the silence around shame. Share these insights with them and remind them that they're not alone. Keep showing up as their biggest ally. So for more tools, check out the resources in the show notes, as I talked about, Therapy Associates, Star Guides, and the Recovery Toolbox for Teens. Parents, if this episode has helped you, please like it. Please leave a review. It helps other parents find this series. Drop me a comment on the website. I'd love to hear from you, see your thoughts and questions. And together, we're guiding our teens towards freedom, one step at a time. Till next time, keep the faith and keep showing up for your kids.